Grace and peace to you, friends. I pray you are doing well today. We are continuing our conversation talking about David. And as you'll see, we're going to be jumping ahead a few chapters, and so many that we're going to jump to the next book. We're going to start in 2 Samuel. And I encourage you then to go back and read the 10 or 11 verses or chapters that we did not go over. But we're jumping ahead to 2 Samuel chapter 1, and we're going to go 1 through chapter 5 today. And we see here, this is where David is now he'll be taking on that role as king. Chapter 1 starts in, and we see David, he is mourning and lamenting. That's the term that is used, lamenting over the death and the discovery of the death of Saul. A man comes to David and shares this news with him. Verse 3. "Where have you come from?" David asked him. He answered, "I have escaped from the Israelite camp." "What happened?" David asked. "Tell me." He said, "The men fled from the battle. Many of them fell and died, and Saul and his son Jonathan are dead." Then David said to the young man who brought him the report, "How do you know that Saul and his son Jonathan are dead?" "I happened to be on Mount Gilboa," the young man said, "and there was Saul, leaning on his spear, with the chariots and riders almost upon him. When he turned around and saw me, he called out to me, and I said, 'What can I do?' He asked me, 'Who are you?' 'An Amalekite,' I answered. Then he said to me, 'Stand over me and kill me. I am in the throes of death, but I am still alive.' So I stood over him and killed him, because I knew that after he had fallen, he could not survive. And I took the crown that was on his head and the band on his arms, and have brought them here to my Lord." So David is given this account from this individual, and we will see then David lamenting. And oftentimes that is what our Psalms are filled with. They are filled with laments. That is common what they are. I believe it's been said, I think it's over 1/3 of the Psalms are all in these lamenting styles. Verses 19 through 27 is that lament of David. And then we continue on into chapter 2. David is anointed king. We find this in verse 4, which says, "Then the men of Judah came to Hebron, and there they anointed David king over the house of Judah." Now we understand that this was a private ceremony. There wasn't a large gathering necessarily. But they anointed him king over Judah. Now he is not king over Israel yet. And we'll see when that happens then later on. Now we will see as we read through the chapters that David still has a care and a love for Saul. And we see that in his care for his other son, Ishbosheth. And there are people that really will desire for David to become king over all of Israel. And David is not as worried about it. He said he gives that over to the Lord. David does rule over Judah for about 7.5 years. Ishbosheth is only ruling over Israel for 2 years. Now this is the time where there's tension because Israel is divided. You have Ishbosheth who is ruling over Israel. And then David ruling over Judah to the north. We continue on, war and battles break out, and I encourage you all to read. I'm not going to go through all the aspects of it, but war breaks out, and there is really intense things going on here. Different individuals being killed, challenges of of men to have it almost appears to be a mock battle, but it challenges of 12 men representing Benjamin and 12 men representing David. And these chapters continue on, and we get to chapter 4, which is really what I want to focus in on today. Now, chapter 4, we see two brothers desire to, well, I believe that they're desiring to do something what they believe is right on David's behalf, but they realize just how wrong their actions were. Now, these two brothers I'm referring to are Baanah and Rechab. Now, I'm going to read for you verses 5, and we'll go through and you'll see the event of which we're talking about, these brothers. Now Rechab and Baanah, the sons of Rimmon the Beerothite, set out for the house of Ishbosheth, and they arrived there in the heat of the day while he was taking his noonday rest. They went into the inner part of the house as if to get some wheat, and they stabbed him in the stomach. Then Rechab and his brother Baanah slipped away. They had gone into the house while he was lying on the bed in his bedroom. After they stabbed and killed him, they cut off his head, taking it with them. They traveled all night by the way of Arabah. They brought the head of Ishbosheth to David at Hebron and said to the king, "Here is the head of Ishbosheth, son of Saul, your enemy, who tried to take your life. This day the Lord has avenged my lord the king against Saul and his offspring." Now, at this time, I can't even imagine being David, being presented with this situation. And I realize there are different cultural norms back then, but still, you might imagine a shaking of the head, and just we will see probably anger here in a moment. But I imagine a shaking of the head that David is doing. You know, he's probably wondering, these men just have no idea what they just did. And he responds by saying this: "As surely as the Lord lives, who has delivered me out of all trouble, when a man told me Saul is dead and thought he was bringing good news, I seized him and put him to death in Ziklag. That was the reward I gave him for his news. How much more, when wicked men have killed an innocent man in his own house and on his own bed, should I not now demand his blood from your hand and rid the earth of you?" Yeah, I mean, you hear it from David. These brothers thought they were doing something good. Man, they were in for a world, truly a world of hurt, and they were obviously thought wrong. Although this news and this event really angers and bothers David, it brings us to the moment that he is now anointed over all of Israel. Chapter 5, verse 3. When all the elders of Israel had come to King David at Hebron, the king made a compact with them at Hebron before the Lord, and they anointed David king over Israel. So now it's happened. David is in charge. David is the king that the people desire, and the king that God chose, really. And he has now been anointed. And verse 5, I'm going to cut it off here, but really verse 5 then continues on, and it tells how he conquers Jerusalem, he defeats the Philistines, and just what continues to happen after that. I encourage you to finish off reading that today. So we can take a handful of things from these accounts and from these chapters. But one thing I want to focus in on today is chapter 4. Take a look at Rechab and Baanah. These are two men who they were probably thinking, this is going to be a great thing. We're going to serve our king well, and we're doing this as payback, revenge, whatever you want to call it. And they don't even know what they are getting themselves into. Truly, David is still honorific. He still holds honor towards Saul and loyalty towards the Lord. And even though the Lord's anointing has moved to David, David still has that love and respect for Saul. That Saul was still originally God's chosen at that time, and so David responds in a way that to him is not just to him, but it's justified. Yes, Saul still did horrible things, but David is still honoring the house of the Lord. He's still honoring Saul by doing this. And it brings me to this thought. We can oftentimes get brought into gossip. We get brought in sucked into it because I think there's that desire to unite with someone, to have a common enemy. You think about, for those of you that may follow things on YouTube as well, there are people who make a living off of sharing drama, off of going into gossip, into the details. And I don't even think of like the news channels, news channels like TMZ and all those other things that they talk about, the celebrity gossip. And I think about, at times we can get so sucked into that stuff, and we get sucked into gossip into a point where almost we might even desire harm for that other person. We desire to do things on the behalf of another individual. And that, friends, is not a proper, it's not a proper anger. It's truly not. And you have to stop and ask yourself, is this for me to deal with emotionally? Would the Lord have me allow this to consume my time, my energy, and my mental space? And I guarantee, oftentimes it will be no. Oftentimes we need to protect our minds, guard ourselves from being sucked into those stories and into those things that create anger, that really synthesize feelings that we don't even need to have in the first place. And gossip, getting sucked into that, can be so damaging to ourselves. Now, friends, I've been there. I know what it is to get sucked into gossip. And at the end of the day, it steals your peace. Because you start to emotionally invest yourself in something that you have no business being invested in the first place. And you start to realize this is just taking up my time, it's taking up my energy, it's taking up my peace. And truly, this may not be something that the Lord would have us even worry about. When you think of Banah and Rechab, they took action on their own part to do something that they thought was right, do something that they thought David desired. But they found out just how wrong, truly how wrong they were. So friends, challenge you and remind you, do not be like Banah and Rechab. Don't get sucked into that stuff. At the end of the day, it may cause you to go into a dark place. So truly, friends, I thank you for your time this day, and may the Lord bless you and keep you. Amen.